Let me tell you the story about the Mage of Blackfire. The war had no end. For centuries the kingdom of Solmara stood as the most powerful realm in the western lands, its banners of gold and deep crimson flying high over its fortresses. Beyond its borders, however, the free clans of Eldrin remained defiant. These rebels, scattered across the highlands and valleys, refused to bow to the king's rule. Every few decades, a fragile peace was declared, and every few decades, it was shattered. King Edric, the unyielding, did not believe in peace. He believed in dominion, and I was the man who would give it to him. My name is Magnus Ravencourt, High Arcanist of the Grand Academy of Solmara. Since my youth, I had been obsessed with magic, not the crude elemental spells of battle mages, nor the enchantments of feeble court wizards, but the fundamental essence of magic itself. I had spent my life unraveling its mysteries, trying to understand the very threads of reality that bound the world together. Most mages wielded magic like a hammer, but I saw it as something greater, a force of nature that could be harnessed, refined, shaped into something truly unstoppable. That belief brought me to the Grand Academy, where I studied under the greatest scholars of the age. I learned from sages who had spent their lives unlocking the secrets of ley lines, from alchemists who could distill arcane essence into pure mana, from enchanters who wove spells into the very fabric of steel. Yet none of it was enough. The more I learned, the more I realized that magic, true magic, was still beyond our grasp, until I discovered the Celestine shards. It started as a theory, a hypothesis buried in the old tomes of the Eldorian mystics, long thought to be heretical texts. They spoke of light as the purest form of magic, of raw luminance that could be harnessed, focused, and unleashed. A magic that did not burn or explode like fire, nor shatter like earth, but something else entirely, something that erased. It was a theory, a dangerous one, and then the king called for me. The summons came on a cold winter's morning. I had spent the night in the lower chambers of the academy, surrounded by ancient scrolls and half-filled alchemical vials, my mind clouded by exhaustion. When the royal messengers arrived, their polished silver armor gleaming under the dim torchlight, I knew my life was about to change forever. "The king commands your presence," the captain of the guards said. I hesitated. "For what purpose? That is not for us to say," the man replied. "But you are to travel to Blackfire Keep at once." Blackfire Keep, the king's war citadel, a fortress known not for politics or diplomacy, but for one thing, war. I packed my things and left the academy behind. I did not know it then, but I would never return. Blackfire Keep stood upon the northern cliffs, overlooking the vast expanse of the Everfrost Sea. It was not a place of beauty or grace. It was a fortress of black stone, forged in fire, and built to withstand sieges for generations. The moment I arrived, I knew this was no simple summons. The guards escorted me through the narrow torch-lit halls, past grand war chambers, where knights and tacticians argued over maps of the kingdom. I saw weapons being forged, siege engines being assembled, potions and alchemical explosives stacked in iron-walled storage vaults. Blackfire Keep was preparing for something terrible. I was led into the king's private chamber. King Edric stood at the far end of the room, draped in a dark crimson cloak, his steel crown resting heavy upon his brow. He was not a man of elaborate robes or golden ornaments. His crown was built for war, not ceremony. His eyes, cold and calculating, studied me as I entered. Beside him stood Lord Anton Valkan, his most trusted advisor, a man as sharp and ruthless as a dagger in the dark. And next to Valkan was a warrior I recognized immediately, Commander Aldrich Valen, the king's fist, the man responsible for the bloodiest battles in Solmara's history. His red-plated armor bore the mark of the burning sun, the elite force that had razed half the Free Clan's villages to the ground. They were waiting for me. "You are Magnus Ravencourt," the king said. It was not a question. I bowed slightly. "I am your grace." "You are the greatest mind in the kingdom," he continued, "and you are here to build me a weapon." I had expected as much, but still, I had to ask, what kind of weapon? Valkern smiled. "The last one we will ever need." I frowned. "I do not forge swords, my lord." Valen scoffed. "We do not need swords. We need a means to end this war once and for all." I looked at the king. "You seek something more than steel." The king's expression did not change. "I seek dominion, mage. The Free Clans of Eldrin have defied my rule for too long. I will not waste another decade fighting them in the hills and forests. I will not suffer another broken treaty." His gaze hardened. "I want a weapon that will make war obsolete." A cold feeling settled in my chest. They knew of my work, of my studies into pure luminance, of the Celestine shards, and now they wanted me to turn theory into destruction. The king stepped forward. "You will be given all the resources you require, the finest alchemists, the most skilled enchanters, the most brilliant minds in Solmara." He paused. "And you will succeed." I had a choice in that moment. I could have refused. I could have turned away and let them execute me for defying the crown. But the truth was, I wanted to see if it could be done. The power I had studied, the magic I had dreamed of, it was within reach. And if I did not build it, someone else would. I bowed my head. "As you command, your grace." The king smiled. "Then go and build me a weapon to end all wars." I turned and left the chamber, Valkern's gaze lingering on me as I walked past. I had sealed my fate, and I had just begun the first step toward creating the deadliest spell the world had ever known. That night, I stood atop Blackfire Keep, staring at the stars above. The sea raged below, crashing against the cliffs, its dark waves relentless. I thought of the old tomes I had studied in secret, the warnings left behind by ancient mages. "Power," they had written, "is not meant to be hoarded. Power is meant to be feared." And yet I had been given limitless power to shape the world. For a moment I wondered if I had made a mistake. Then I turned away from the sea and walked into the darkness of the keep. Tomorrow, I would begin my work, and I would change history forever. The war had not ended, but I had been given the means to end it. The halls of Blackfire Keep had become my prison and my workshop, the cold stone walls pressing in around me as I worked day and night to construct a weapon unlike any that had ever existed, a spell not meant to wound or burn, a spell meant to erase. The God's Bane, they called it. It had begun as a theory. The Celestine shards, stolen from the sacred temples of Eldoria, were said to contain the purest form of magic, luminance stripped of elemental influence, magic in its rawest, most unfiltered state. Unlike the crude spells of war mages, which manipulated the natural elements, the Celestine energy was something different, something that did not break, something that did not burn, something that simply removed. I had spent years studying the forbidden texts, theorizing the implications of a spell that did not destroy matter, but instead unraveled the threads of existence itself, a force so absolute that it would not leave behind fire or ruin, but only empty air, where something once stood, a fortress, a battlefield, a city. Now, the king had commanded me to make it real, and I had agreed. The workshop I had been given was deep beneath the keep, a vast chamber where war alchemists had once forged explosives and burning oils. Now, it belonged to me and my chosen scholars, those who had been sent by the Grand Academy to assist me in my work. Among them was Lady Evelyn Varos, my most trusted apprentice, who had once studied under me at the academy. She had followed me to Blackfire Keep without hesitation, though now I saw the weight of regret settling into her shoulders. There was Master Enchanter Theon, a man older than I by 2 decades, his hands ink-stained from centuries spent scribing runes onto enchanted steel. He had voiced his doubts from the beginning, but the king had sent him here nonetheless. And there was Vollen Dern, an alchemist who had long been fascinated by the idea of bending magic to his will. He did not question the work. He did not question anything. His loyalty was to knowledge itself, and to the promise of greatness that came with it. We were the ones who would reshape the world, or ruin it. The spell began with the Celestine core. The king had given me every shard stolen from the Eldorian priests, an act that I knew had sealed his fate in the eyes of the gods. These shards had once been worshipped, placed in sacred halls where their light burned eternal, believed to be fragments of divinity itself. Now, they were stacked in crates, like mere resources, stripped of their sacredness, waiting to be used for war. We forged them into a single core, a sphere of condensed luminance, bound by alchemical runes and silver chains, suspended in the center of a massive enchanted lattice. Around it, we built the prism array, a collection of focusing lenses and spellbound mirrors that would refine the raw energy into something concentrated, something that could be unleashed with precision. But even as the core was assembled, I could feel something was wrong. The magic was never meant to be contained this way. Evelyn saw it too. This magic, she whispered one night, as we stood before the glowing core. It feels unnatural. All magic is unnatural, I said. She frowned. Not like this. This feels like something that should not exist. I had no answer for her, because I knew she was right. As the days passed, we worked tirelessly to refine the spell. The king demanded progress reports, sending Commander Aldrich Vollen to inspect our work. The war was not going well. Though the Veldrathian forces had burned villages and captured rebel strongholds, the free clans still fought, striking back in the hills, refusing to be broken. The king grows impatient, Vollen told me one morning, his armored form standing in the shadows of my workshop. He wants the spell ready within the month. I turned to him, weary. A spell like this cannot be rushed. His eyes narrowed. Then work faster. I clenched my jaw. You don't understand the forces we are dealing with. This is not fire or steel. This is magic that bends the fabric of existence. If we do not prepare it properly, it could consume more than we intend. Vollen smiled coldly. Then you had best prepare it properly. He left, his boots echoing down the stone corridor. Evelyn exhaled once he was gone. He doesn't care about the risks. No, I said. He doesn't, but I did, and I was starting to wonder if I had created something far worse than I had imagined. The spell neared completion. We constructed a final containment field around the core, bound with chains of void steel, one of the few materials that could hold pure luminance in place. The prism array was activated, the lenses shifting, aligning, bending the energy into a focused point. The first test would be upon a ruined watchtower in the Western Valley, a structure long abandoned, a place that no longer held life, or so I told myself. The king and his war council gathered at the observation platform, high above the valley, where the spell would be cast. The Celestine core pulsed beneath the keep, feeding energy into the focusing array. I stood before the casting platform, my hands hovering over the final runic sequence. The moment had come. Evelyn stood beside me, tense. Are you certain? No, but I nodded anyway. I traced the final rune, and I spoke the words of power. The world trembled, the sky split apart. A column of pure luminance surged from the array, faster than any lightning I had ever seen, a beam of unfiltered magic streaking across the sky. It struck the watchtower, and the watchtower ceased to exist. No explosion, no ruin, just nothing. A perfect emptiness where stone and history had once stood. Silence fell upon the gathered warlords, then a roar of triumph. Commander Vollen turned to the king, grinning. "It works." The king did not smile. He simply nodded. "Good." I stared at the empty space where the tower had been, and for the first time, I truly understood what I had done. That night, I could not sleep. I sat in my chamber, staring at the flames of my hearth, replaying the moment in my mind. Not the beam, not the spell, the silence, the absolute void that had remained after the spell had been cast. Evelyn entered, her face pale. "We made a mistake," she whispered. I knew she was right, but it was too late. The king had seen the spell work, and now he would demand more. There would be no stopping what came next. I had forged a spell unlike any before it, and now it was no longer mine to control. The god's bane was real, and war would never be the same. The god's bane had been cast. The watchtower in the western valley was gone, erased as though it had never existed. There was no debris, no ruin, no smoke curling into the sky, just a perfect, hollow absence where stone and history had once stood. The king had watched it happen with cold, calculating eyes. Commander Aldrich Valen had grinned like a man who had just witnessed the forging of a new god, and I had felt something deep within me shatter. This was not a weapon, this was annihilation, and soon it would be turned against the living. Blackfire Keep was alive with celebration. The warlords drank, the generals feasted, the soldiers roared with laughter in the halls. News of the spell's success spread like wildfire through the king's court, and for the first time in years, there was no talk of skirmishes, no discussions of strategies or battle formations. There was only certainty. Solmara had won the war before the final battle had even begun. The free clans of Eldrin would not be conquered by sword or siege. They would be erased from existence. Evelyn and I did not join the celebration. Instead, we stood alone in the arcane chamber beneath the keep, watching the Celestine core pulse softly within its containment lattice. The energy had settled since the first casting, its glow now a dull, steady thrum, like the slow heartbeat of something vast and unknowable. She stared at it with quiet horror. "It worked." I nodded. She turned to me. "Do you even know why?" The question caught me off guard. I had spent my life unraveling the mysteries of magic, studying the nature of spellcraft, the interactions between mana and reality itself. And yet, as I stood before the core, watching the unearthly light pulse against the cold stone walls, I realized I did not know what I had created. I understood the theory. I understood the mathematics, the sequences of runes, the way the Celestine energy was refined and focused through the prism array. But what had truly happened when I cast the spell? Had I burned the tower from existence, or had I unmade it entirely? I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Where did it go?" Evelyn looked at me with something close to fear, and I had no answer to give her. The king summoned me at dawn. I had not slept. His war council was gathered in the great hall, standing before an unfurled map of the highlands, where the last strongholds of the free clans remained. A dozen fortresses still stood beyond the kingdom's reach, deep in the valleys and mountains, where no army could march unchallenged. That no longer mattered. Kael Tharin, the king said, pointing to the map, the stronghold of the free clans, their capital, their heart, the last city that defied him. "You will cast the spell upon it in 5 days' time," he continued. "This war ends here." The warlords nodded in agreement. The generals murmured amongst themselves. Only I remained silent. "Something troubles you, mage." I hesitated, feeling the weight of every gaze upon me. "The spell," I said carefully, "has never been cast upon a city. We do not know its true extent, its reach." The king's eyes narrowed. "It will destroy the city, will it not?" "Yes," I admitted, "but it may also destroy the land itself. It may make the valley uninhabitable. It will end the war," he interrupted. I swallowed hard. And if it does more than that? A long silence followed. Then Commander Valen spoke. What are you suggesting, Ravencourt? I looked at him. That we do not understand what we have built. That we have wielded a force we cannot yet control. He smiled coldly. Then we shall learn, when it is cast upon Kael Tharin. I turned to the king. Your grace, I urge caution. His gaze was like ice. You built this weapon, mage, and you will wield it. That is not a request. My fingers curled into fists. The warlords resumed their discussion, speaking of troop movements, siege preparations that were no longer necessary, the logistics of an army marching upon a battlefield that would no longer exist. No one spoke of the people of Kael Tharin. No one spoke of the thousands that would be silenced in an instant. I stood in the center of the war council, surrounded by men who had already declared victory over an enemy that had not yet been defeated, and I realized then I was the only one afraid of what we had created. That night, Evelyn and I stood alone on the battlements of Blackfire Keep. The Everfrost Sea stretched beyond the cliffs, its dark waters crashing against the jagged rocks below. The wind howled through the stone corridors, carrying with it the distant echoes of the soldiers' celebrations. She turned to me. You have to stop this. I closed my eyes. There is no stopping it. There is if you refuse to cast it. I let out a slow breath. And then what? Do you think they will let me walk away? Do you think they will not simply find another mage to take my place? She said nothing, because we both knew the truth. The king had seen the spell work. It no longer mattered if I doubted it. Kael Tharin would burn, whether I cast the spell or not. Evelyn looked away, her fingers tightening against the cold stone. Then there's only one way. I turned to her. We destroy it, she whispered. I did not answer at first. The thought had lingered in my mind for days, buried beneath my fear, beneath my denial, beneath the quiet, treacherous hope that the king would see reason. But the king had no reason left. Only war, only conquest, only power. I met Evelyn's gaze, and I nodded. We moved quickly. The Celestine core was stored in the lower chambers of Blackfire Keep, beneath layers of enchanted stone, beneath runes of warding and chains of void steel. We had built the containment lattice to withstand any force known to magic, but we had built it, and we knew its weaknesses. The night before the casting, we descended into the depths of the keep. If we could shatter the core, if we could disrupt the focusing array, if we could collapse the containment lattice, then the spell could never be cast again. The warlords and generals were preparing for battle. The king had already retired to his chambers, waiting for the dawn that would mark his final victory. No one would see us. No one would stop us. We reached the chamber door. I whispered a spell of unbinding. The runes flickered, then faded. The locks unlatched. We stepped inside. The Celestine core pulsed before us. Evelyn drew a small vial from her satchel, liquid void steel, an alchemical substance designed to unravel arcane constructs. One drop upon the core, and the magic would fail. We stepped forward, and the doors behind us slammed open. A dozen royal sentinels stormed into the chamber, their weapons drawn, and at their head, smiling like a wolf, stood Commander Uldric Valen. Did you really think, he murmured, stepping forward, that the king did not see this coming? Evelyn paled. I stilled. Valen's smile widened. The Godsbane will fire at dawn. I stared at the Celestine core, pulsing softly in its iron cradle, and I realized then I had already lost. The Godsbane would fire at dawn. That much was certain. Commander Uldric Valen had seen to it, stepping into the chamber with the confidence of a man who had already won. The royal sentinels at his back moved with precision, closing every possible escape route, their hands steady on the hilts of their swords. Evelyn and I stood frozen before the pulsing Celestine core, our attempt to destroy the spell exposed before it had even begun. Valen stepped forward, his dark crimson cloak shifting behind him. "Did you truly believe you could stop this, Ravencourt?" I did not answer, because I knew the truth. The king had been watching me, perhaps from the moment I hesitated at the war council, perhaps from the moment I first voiced my doubts. He had never trusted me, and now my fate had been sealed. Valen's smirk widened. "The king is disappointed in you, mage." Disappointed. The word was almost amusing. I had given them everything. I had built this monstrosity, shaped its terrible light, refined its power so that it could unmake stone and steel. I had unlocked the most forbidden of magical forces, something so vast and absolute that even I did not fully understand it. And now I was to be cast aside, not as a hero, not even as a mage, but as a traitor. I exhaled slowly. "Then I suppose we have nothing more to discuss." Valen gestured to the sentinels. "Take them." The guards surged forward. Eveline reached for her satchel, no doubt hoping to throw the vial of liquid void steel onto the Celestine core, but a soldier gripped her wrist before she could. I tried to resist, summoning a flicker of magic at my fingertips, but Valen was faster. His gauntlet fist slammed into my ribs, knocking the breath from my lungs. The magic flickered out instantly. My concentration shattered. The sentinels seized us, cold iron chains snapping around our wrists, heavy manacles binding our hands. Valen leaned in, his voice a quiet sneer. "The king has ordered you kept alive, Ravencourt. He still has use for you." Eveline glared. "And what of me?" His expression did not change. You will be an example." A chill ran through me, because I knew what he meant. They would execute her, and they would make me watch. We were taken to the lower dungeons of Blackfire Keep, deep beneath the war chambers, beneath the towering walls, beneath even the alchemical laboratories. There was a prison carved into the bedrock itself. The walls were damp, ancient, marked with the scars of prisoners long forgotten. The only light came from flickering braziers set in iron brackets, casting eerie shadows that shifted and stretched across the stone. The guards dragged Eveline away first. She did not fight. She only met my eyes once, before she was pulled down the corridor, her expression unreadable. Then she was gone. I was shoved into a small dark cell, the heavy door slamming shut behind me. I did not call after her, because I knew it would do no good. I leaned back against the cold wall, my head throbbing, my ribs aching from Valen's blow. The silence pressed against me. The weight of my failure settled deep in my bones. I had tried to stop this, and I had failed. Cael'Tharin would be erased. Tens of thousands of souls would vanish into nothingness, wiped from history by my own creation. And when the sun rose, I would hear the cheers of the king's men as they celebrated the fall of their enemies. And Eveline, I clenched my fists. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be something I could do. But I saw no path forward, no escape, no salvation. I had built the most powerful spell in existence, and now it had been turned against me. I did not know how much time passed before Valen returned. The cell door creaked open, torchlight spilling across the damp stone. He stepped inside, his boots silent on the floor. I did not look up. "You've been quiet," he said. I remained still. He tilted his head. "Not planning any last spells, are you, mage?" My voice was hollow. "You took my magic." He smiled. "I took your hands." He gestured to my shackled wrists. "But a man like you doesn't need hands to be dangerous. A man like you can turn words into weapons." He crouched down, his voice lowering. "You could still serve the king, you know." I exhaled. "By what?" "Refining the spell further, perfecting the way it erases cities, by ensuring it does not fall into the hands of our enemies." I let out a breath of bitter laughter. "Our enemies? What enemies will be left when you are done?" Valen said nothing. Then he stood. "You misunderstand, Raven Court," he said. "The free clans are not the last enemy. They are simply the next one." The words sent a chill through me. I knew then, this was not about war, not anymore. It was about control. Once the free clans were gone, once the highlands were reduced to empty valleys, there would always be another enemy, another kingdom, another people, another city to erase. The king would never stop. I had unleashed something that could never be contained, and I had given it to a man who would never stop using it. Valen studied me for a long moment. Then he turned. "The execution will be held at dawn," he said. "You will be given a front row seat." He strode from the cell. The door slammed shut once more, and I was alone in the darkness. Dawn came too soon. I was dragged from my cell, my wrists still bound in iron. The guards led me through the winding corridors, up the stone steps, back into the light of the keep's great hall, and there, in the center of the courtyard, Eveline knelt before the executioner's block. She was pale, but her eyes were steady. She did not look afraid. A crowd had gathered, soldiers, warlords, nobles in fine robes who had come to witness the fall of a traitor. King Edric sat upon his blackened iron throne, watching with a face carved from stone, and beside him, Valen stood, arms folded. I struggled against my captors. She had nothing to do with this. The king did not acknowledge me. Valen merely smiled. The executioner raised his axe. Eveline turned her gaze to mine. She whispered something I could not hear, and then the axe fell. The world blurred. A roar of triumph erupted from the gathered crowd. A soldier seized my shoulder, dragging me back. I did not resist. I felt nothing, nothing, except the hollow silence where Eveline had once been. The sky above Blackfire Keep burned with morning light, and somewhere, far beyond these walls, the Celestine Core was being prepared for war. The Godsbane would fire today, and no one could stop it. I had tried. I had fought. I had betrayed my king, turned against my own work, risked everything to undo the horrors I had created, and I had failed. Eveline was dead. The Celestine Core was charged. The focusing array was set. Calatharin was doomed, and I could do nothing but watch. I was dragged from my cell as the first light of dawn spilled over Blackfire Keep. The guards said nothing. They did not jeer or mock me, did not spit at my feet or curse my name as they had the night before. Perhaps they did not see the point. I was already a dead man. Even if I lived past today, I would never be free of this. The weight of it pressed against my ribs as they led me through the great halls, past the warlords and generals who had gathered for this momentous occasion. For them, this was a day of victory. For me, it was a funeral. For the living, we stepped onto the grand observation platform that jutted out over the cliffs, overlooking the valley below. Far in the distance, nestled between the mountains, Calatharin stood. I had never been there, I had never walked its streets, never spoken to its people, but I knew what lay beyond its walls. Families, children, merchants, smiths, mages, warriors who had fought for freedom, for something they believed in, and soon there would be nothing. The king sat upon his throne of black iron, positioned at the center of the platform. As Lord Valkern stood beside him, expression unreadable. Commander Valen, clad in his crimson armor, watched me with a quiet satisfaction. "This is an honor, mage," the king said. "Not many live to witness the moment they changed the world." I did not answer. I could barely breathe. The Celestine Core hummed behind me, suspended in its arcane lattice, pulsing with raw power. The focusing array was in place, the runes aligned, the energy bending toward a single inescapable purpose. All that remained was the final casting, and I could do nothing to stop it. The king rose from his throne. He turned to me, the morning light casting long shadows across his face. You have served Solmara well, Magnus Ravencourt, he said. His voice was steady, measured. You have given us an end to war, a peace that will last beyond your lifetime, beyond mine. You should be proud. I swallowed hard. You don't understand, I whispered. The king raised a brow. What is there to understand? You think this is victory, I said, my voice hoarse. You think this will be the end of it, but it won't. He studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled. There is always another enemy, he said, and then he gave the command. The final rune was traced, the spell activated, the Celestine core pulsed, its glow expanding, growing brighter than the sun itself. The prism array ignited, bending the raw luminance into a single focused beam, and then the world split apart. A column of pure destruction tore across the sky, streaking toward Calatharin like a god's judgment. I could do nothing but watch. The light struck the city, and Calatharin ceased to exist. There was no fire, no crumbling ruins, no towers collapsing in slow, majestic ruin, just silence, just absence. The city, the people, the history of generations, gone. The valley where it had stood was empty, a hollow space where nothing remained, not even dust. A great silence settled over Blackfire Keep. The warlords and generals who had gathered to witness the event did not cheer. Even the king, for all his ruthlessness, said nothing at first, because this was not like any weapon they had seen before. This was not fire and ruin, this was annihilation. Valkern broke the silence first. He let out a quiet breath. It worked. Valen grinned. The war is over. The war is over. I almost laughed, because I knew the truth. The war had not ended. It had simply changed. Because what kingdom, what empire, could wield such power and not use it again? What ruler could erase an enemy so completely and not hunger for more? The what man, when given the power of the gods, would ever let it rest? The free clans were gone, but soon the king would see another threat, another enemy, another city to erase. This was not the end of war. It was the beginning of something worse. And I had done this. Me, Magnus Ravencourt, the greatest mage of his age, a man who had once sought knowledge, who had once believed that magic was meant to uplift, to enlighten, to reveal the secrets of the universe. Now I was nothing but a murderer, on a scale no man had ever achieved. I had unmade a city, then now I had to live with what I had done. That night, I sat alone in my cell. They did not kill me, they did not execute me, or burn me at the stake for treason. They did not even exile me, because I was too valuable to be discarded. The king still had use for me. There were other enemies, other cities, other spells to create, and so I remained in the keep, alive, but no longer human. I would walk the halls, a ghost of my former self, a man cursed to witness the power he had unleashed again and again, as city after city vanished beneath the blinding luminance of the god's bane, until one day, when there were no enemies left, only silence, then a man who had become death itself